In today's session, let's talk on development and change. Rural development, as defined by the World Bank, is a strategy to improve the economic and social life of a particular group of people, that is, the rural poor. UN Statistical Commission in 1960 indicated 9 components for a general improvement of the standard of living of common man. These are health, food consumption and nutrition, education, employment and labor condition, housing, social security, clothing, recreation, and human freedom. For the actual improvement of standard of living, these components depend on social and cultural traditions as well as the interplay of economic, social, and other factors. Anthropologists and other social scientists work to change or improve the lives of men. In post-colonial period, anthropologists increasingly involve themselves with the planning process. Tradition was considered as a dominant factor responsible for the failure of development and change in the third world. So, the planners and administrators thought to minimize its significance in rural development planning and implementation. However, contrary to earlier beliefs, anthropological researchers in simple societies express that tradition and modernity are not in conflict. Rather, they may be mutually reinforcing. Traditional social and cultural patterns can be utilized to promote the overall goals of development. Reporting on the Nigerian experience, S.K. Taime Williams in 1971 concludes that possession of technological knowledge alone is not enough in getting agricultural development moving on its path of contributing to overall economic development. This has led to be buttressed with knowledge of some of the sociological factors such as land tenure system, family and village organization, value and norms, systems of sanction and assignment of roles, and the role of strong solidarity among the people. From a study on the people of Madagascar, the Malagasy, Kotak mentions that people gain economic development through their organization of traditional descent system and concludes that successful economic development projects have to consider respect or at least start without attacking local cultural patterns. Government is anxious to see the poor being benefited directly and the poor to take part in development programs actively. However, resistance to the developmental change is generally found amongst the people in developing countries. There are many factors for this resistance. The first point is the rural poor do not believe the officials and view them as unpredictable, unsympathetic, ignorant, and immeasurably powerful, and do not understand their problems. Another factor is that the rich and powerful persons in the village are keen to monopolize contacts with the outside government agencies, thereby keeping the agencies from having direct contact with the poor. The third factor is a question of social distance between the officials and the poor. In India, the officials from higher caste want to keep a distance with the poor people of lower caste, and they meet with the elites of the village. S.C. Dubé in 1958 studied about the effect of community development program at two villages in UP in India. The villages are Rajput and Tyagi villages, and concludes that only a very small percentage of the villagers knew about the plan. Communication gap was probably the weakest part of the program. It is also important to note that any alteration in the existing pattern of the closely knit societies with their settled ways of life to welcome unpredicted change is very difficult. Until the people are willing and able to adjust themselves to behavioral changes that the innovation necessarily entails, there is little chance of promotional efforts making any significant impact. The idea of planned cultural change in anthropology is a recent one. John Bennett in 1959 has pointed that planned cultural change stresses creativity, the liberation of human resources, and the value of betterment. The concept also indicates the reality of conservatism, reaction, and obstructionism to any progress or change. Though men want change, they also fear its consequences, which are not necessarily irrational fears. Planning cultural change is very different from planning a city, a highway, a building, or a bridge. It relates to the undeterminable human factors. The planned cultural change seeks to achieve the developmental change without culture crisis, as well as to predict and control the process of change. Understanding problematic situation of the community, an analysis of the implications of practical problem of the change agent, and exploration of explicit or implicit disparities of the problematic situation and practical problem are the prerequisites of planned change. As far as development work is concerned, anthropologists can act either as clinical anthropologists or engineering anthropologists. Clinical anthropologist interprets his role to the client and provides the client with decision-making tools, including regional information concerning the probable consequences of alternative possible choices. Engineering anthropologist involves himself in formulating specific recommendations for his client regarding the implementation of specific policy objectives or even regarding policy and objectives as such, and is also involved in controlling, guiding, and accelerating adaptive change. Traditionally, applied anthropology takes a peripheral role in the entire affair of development and planned change. In America, around 1950, the idea of action anthropology was developed under the leadership of Sol Text. An action anthropologist takes part as a project in charge and decides what to do and how to do it. Again, development anthropologists are the applied anthropologists who got themselves associated with planning and development in developing countries. In development work, anthropology plays a great role. Of all the social sciences, anthropology has the distinction of having fieldwork research. Through good fieldwork, anthropologists is more familiar with the rural poor and the underdeveloped environment. British government got a taste of anthropological knowledge for solving the problems of the tribals as early as 1936, when it sent E. Evans Pritchard to study the problem of the Nuer, a Nilotic people of Sudan in South Africa. After his successful work, British government made it mandatory for its officers to undergo a course of training in social cultural anthropology before their posting in tribal areas. In the US, under action anthropology, very faithful results were procured. A number of Red Indian communities living at measurable conditions or living at the verge of extinction gets benefit under the study of action anthropology. In India, L.P. Vidya-mitra, P.K. Bhaumik, etc. were notable action anthropologists. Vidya-mitra in 1968 suggests that an anthropologist is not only a social doctor who diagnoses the evils of society, but also a social engineer who can reconstruct healthy society. Many development agencies and governments have employed anthropologists as consultants. They contribute significantly in every stage of development, process planning, implementation, monitoring, and evaluation. Development policy aims to promote equity. Increase equity means reduce in poverty and an even justice in the distribution of wealth. Poverty benefits the non-poor in general and the rich and powerful in particular. They are interested to maintain poverty. So, if projects are carried out to increase equity, these projects must have the support of reform-minded government. Some type of development projects may produce negative result to quality of life and to equity. In Bahia, in Brazil, Kotak in 1999 finds that many fishery projects have had negative equity results. In some of development projects, sailboat owners got loans to buy motors for their boats and could get enough profits to buy larger and more expensive boats, while young fishermen who work in their boats could no longer carry the burden of life as fishermen and sought to become wage laborers on land. Fallacies such as under-differentiation or ignoring cultural diversity, the fallacy of over-innovation or trying to bring too much change must be avoided. All these bring negative results. The goals and values of subsistence society differ from the intervention philosophy of development planners. Therefore, different value system must be considered for a successful development program. The programs concerning human development seek to achieve the improvement in the quality of life of the poor. But these programs to promote the human well-being in the third world usually fail to give intended benefit to poor people because of the incompatibility between the strategy and the local socio-cultural patterns. Effective development promotes change, but not over-innovation. So, the most productive strategy of the economic development project is to base the social design for innovation on the indigenous cultural practices and social structures of the targeted area.